Good evening. I'm James Seniak, and I'm your Libertarian Senate candidate this election cycle. And today we're going to talk about the importance of town halls and discuss important topics. Additionally, this is an online town hall, so we love the interaction with you. If you have a question, feel free to ask it and address it. And additionally, you can go live with us if you put live next to your question. Again, I'm James Seniak. I'm a Libertarian U.S. candidate. Please welcome Chris Groff, producing behind the scenes. And Chris, how's it going? How's your night?
Oh, not going too bad. Thankfully, we got a little bit of rain. Hopefully, it'll bring down the temperature a little bit.
It's definitely been a warm weekend.
That's for sure. So you had your last town hall last night, right?
Correct. So we did Middlebury. We went, I believe it was 15 town halls in the end, and we had great conversations with many individuals from the public. Last night was awesome because being the last one, it was in my hometown in Middlebury. So it was awesome how that worked out, and I got to see family up there. And I actually had a decent amount of support turn out up there, so that was awesome to see.
That is good. So going into this, now that the town hall tour is over, how important was it to you going through on this bipartisan town hall with the Democrats?
So to me, it was absolutely essential and a really important part of what happened this election cycle. I think that anytime that we seek a public servant office, it needs to be stated that you're accountable to the public. And the fact that the Democrats opened this up shows that they're willing to come to the table with other parties and talk about issues that are difficult to talk about. And so sometimes even with those issues, there's disagreements, and occasionally, last night was one of them. You get the crowd heckling a little bit, or you get somebody upset at your answer, and that's part of being a public servant is realizing not everybody's going to agree with you on every issue, but you do your best to represent your constituents, no matter where they come from and no matter what side of the aisle they come from.
Absolutely. So going a little further into it, what was the most common question you got throughout all 15 of the town halls?
So all 15 town halls, I think the only question I got at every single one addressed Roe versus Wade. Inflation was right up there, but weirdly, we did not address that last night. And I think last night, the only reason we didn't address it was because unfortunately, we only got to three questions. We had nine candidates, which was awesome, but some of the answers ran over time and we didn't get to as many questions as I would have liked to see.
Yeah, and when you get 9 people up there, if you don't have a strict time limit, then uh, I know sometimes we can get talking about a topic and we can sit here for 20 minutes and talk about the same thing.
Right. So, and I think the best town halls that we went to had really good moderators who are very strict on time, addressed questions to different candidates, and even within that, addressed questions to specific levels. So sometimes there's questions that really are more for a federal level, some are more for state level, and even some as specific as Secretary of State. So I think that when they're well moderated, they really go well because we can address more of those concerns.
Absolutely. I know the one you did here in Hendricks County, they were very strict with that 2-minute time limit.
And it's good because honestly, what politician isn't going to use more than 2 minutes when they can? That's part of how we run. We want to get as much of our message out as possible. And it's very difficult to give a 2 minute answer. Most people would rather give you a 5 minute answer just because of how much you have to leave out within that 2 minutes.
Right. Well, and it kind of goes two ways. I mean, if you can give enough to where somebody's going to come up and they're actually going to talk to you afterwards because they're like, hey, I was really interested in your medical freedom proposition. I want to know more about it. Well, it kind of gets you coming to talk to you. But I do understand the wanting to let's get all the information out there now, and then you can come and we can talk after.
So, yeah, something interesting that actually you just addressed was the fact that people did come up after and want to continue the conversations. Jeff Moore had a really interesting experience about that. So we'll need to hit that next week on part two, talking and discussing the town halls. But some of the feedback I got was, wow, you really um, Well, the one simply put, they said you had balls for coming into an audience that was not your audience to address some of these issues and even the issues we didn't agree on. But to me, it's not about whether the crowd is difficult or easy. That's not what this job is about. This job is about representing people, and I need to be able to have that conversation with somebody who disagrees with me. Because if I'm not willing to have that conversation, then I shouldn't be representing in Washington.
Absolutely. So we did finally get our first question from Larry Silver Jr. Will you continue town halls after you're elected?
Absolutely. And in fact, even though we finished the 15th town hall, this with the Democrats, I would actually like to see some libertarian specific town halls before the election. And then after, I'm definitely going to continue the weekly online town hall. And of course, get out into the public as much as possible. No promises exactly what that looks like, but they're an essential part of the job. And if we're not doing that, then we're not representing Hoosiers.
Absolutely. So I'm curious because I mean, I've never really looked real deep into it. So if you are elected, are you allowed to take questions and stuff through, like, say, a Facebook DM?
As far as
Just like if, like, say I had a question about Todd Young voting for red flag laws, could he answer a question? I mean, if he actually would, is a different story. But could you answer a question if I sent you a Facebook DM if you had a James Seniak U.S. Senator page
yeah,
and you
so
send a question?
what's interesting about that is uh we resort a lot to letter writing and phone calling, but our public officials can be more accessible. The thing is with Facebook, that's awesome, is it is allowed to be used for communication. The only thing that a private DM is different, but the only thing that is uh, regulated on that is if I had a public Facebook page, I have to make sure every comment is seen, and I can't delete any comment, as well as I can't. I can't. Well, when I address something, everybody has to see it. So if it's anything with the job, it has to be accessible to everybody, and I'm not allowed to censor at all, which is really important. That's part of the First Amendment. Now, private DMs would be treated similar to a letter. I don't have to show that to everybody, but
Right.
yes, that is a way that we can be more accessible to the public.
Well, and I see. I feel like that should be utilized a lot more because nowadays, I know we do have one person here in Brownsburg. He's very good about. He puts everything on Facebook. Anything that's going on in the town, on the town council, he's extremely transparent and he puts it out there. And I know you're kind of limited on town council because you can't really. And I don't remember. Danny could quote it better because you can only have so many people on one thread talking. I think if you have more than two, it's considered an actual meeting, and then you get into not notifying of a meeting and
Okay.
all sorts of different stuff. So I wasn't sure if that was different in the federal level.
Yeah, as far as from what I've seen on the federal level, that's just considered communication and addressing issues. So I don't see it as an issue at all. But there might be a regulation with group chats. Say you send me something and you add 3 people. There might be some regulation with that. I'd have to look into that. But as far as I've seen, there really isn't an issue with it.
Yeah, because I feel like that. I mean, everything's getting way more electronic now, and I feel like that would get a lot more people into, hey, why did you vote this way? You could go straight to their page, and if you want, send them a private message. Hey, why did you vote like that?
Well, and that's an important part of the modern part of my campaign is making us more accessible by using the tools that are already here. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but if we just utilize these tools, we're definitely be able to do our job more efficiently and more accountable to the public. And I think that with this being said, we do have currently the second oldest serving U.S. Senate in the history of America, and they just haven't got up to par with utilizing tools and technology that we could utilize to get to the public.
Right, like being recorded in public.
Yeah, that I still can't believe Todd Young did that. I will keep bringing it up and up, and I'm glad you did. I cannot believe that he would host a public event where he told people he cannot be recorded. This means that he does not want to be accountable to, guess what, his employer. You, the people, are his employer. And it was interesting in the beginning of that video. I think several people pointed it out that even the woman speaking said, "It's our privilege to have him here." And I'm thinking to myself, no, it's him being responsible to his employer by being there. And it's not a privilege, it's his honor because he's serving you. And this
Right.
is something they've gotten away from Washington. They think that they're elitist in their mind instead of public servants. And when Washington was running, and he had the ideal that really these offices shouldn't be sought, they should be asked. And he didn't want to keep running. Well, when he saw that there was no more need for whatever position that was, for example, when he was general, he stepped down as general when he saw there was no need for that position anymore. And that's something that our elitist just don't see. They keep running year after year after year and become career politicians and corrupt and lobbyists. And it's just not serving people well.
Absolutely. So we do have a couple of questions that came in. Dino has one here for what is your stance on government lockdowns on businesses or vaccine mandates?
Absolutely not. The government shouldn't be interfering with your livelihood. And I think Rainwater actually said it best. Um, Your job is essential. We saw through COVID that they decided who is essential and who's not. But really, the reality is that if it's important for you to bring food to your table, it's essential, and we can't be shutting down and picking and choosing who is allowed to stay open. And what we saw is big corporations succeed, taking more income than they ever had before, and it really hurt small businesses and private ownership, and hurt our community restaurants, hurt our community economics. And so this is something that we just can't have happen again. Now, if you want to choose to shut down yourself, if you want to have certain regulations in your restaurant as far as who sits where, that's completely up to you. That shouldn't be a government thing. And maybe it's responsible in some situations, but that needs to be individual choices. And it's an individual choice to go to that restaurant. So if you don't feel comfortable with the measures that they're taking, you can take your business elsewhere. It's just a free market economics, and I believe that the government should have definitely took a step back during COVID.
Absolutely. And for vaccine mandates, obviously, that's a part of medical freedom. It should be your choice whether or not. Or, as James likes to say, I'll go ahead and just quote him so he doesn't have to say it again, the government should not be your physician.
So, funny story about that. Danny, my campaign manager, said, "James, you do great when you just talk." And he goes, "The only time you ever really, I don't know if he used the word stumble, but I'm going to use the word stumble in a town hall is when you try to quote yourself from another town hall." He goes, "You need to just stop and just speak from your heart." And it was funny. It's true. Last night, I went to quote something I had said before, and that was the moment was like, okay, what, where am I going? And it's interesting because I think that's something that I noticed is when I speak from my heart, sometimes it doesn't come out perfect, but it's going to address the issue way more than trying to quote a perfect quote or get a perfect headline. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Chris.
Absolutely. That's why I'm here. So we have a first time viewer, Carla. She wants to know a quick elevator pitch and mostly what you stand for in regards to guns, legalization, and healthcare.
Awesome. Great question. I'll give a little bit more of an introduction. I actually kind of skipped most of the introduction. So we'll just give that introduction again. I'm James Siniak. I am seeking the U.S. Senate race as a libertarian, and I really believe in a fresh, modern approach to politics. I believe that Todd Young has proven over and over that his policies are still and not serving Hoosiers. He has spent more than Bernie Sanders, and he clearly is okay with gun control, which I'm not. And I'm running on three things. One, my vet care program. It's designed so that veterans can get the care that they deserve. Really, we've seen a lot of restrictions and red tape within their care, and even we see it mentally. We see I'm gonna have to look up the exact figure again, but how many suicides every day by veterans? And this is a really important issue that we need to address from Washington, D.C. So my vet care program works similar to a health savings account, but it's called a Veterans Personal Care Account. And what it does is it takes funds from the VA and directs them to the veterans' care so that they can get their care from whatever physician best meets their need and whatever location is most convenient for them. The second thing I'm running on is fiscal sanity. Todd Young doesn't represent fiscal sanity. In fact, he has added $10 trillion to our debt. Now, think about the implications to future generations and what that means. We need somebody who's going to go in and promise that we're going to reduce that deficit spending, we're going to balance the budget, and we're going to make sure that economic opportunity is for the next generations. And my third is medical freedom. So during COVID, I saw really an overreach, especially with mandating both masks and vaccines. And I don't believe that politicians should act as our physicians. Medical choices are individual. And whenever you pull out any sort of pill bottle from your cabinet, you'll see on it it has side effects. And those side effects are there for a reason because it warns us of the consequences of whatever we're taking. Often it's better that we take that medication, and that's why our physician recommends it. But ultimately, this is an individual decision that politicians need to stay out of. So, medical freedom is something that I'm really pushing. I think we need a Medical Freedom Act that encourages even um, more regulation with HIPAA and privacy from the government itself, and understanding that these are very important and sensitive decisions to Hoosiers. So, those are the three goals that I really have in this race. And I think that we can accomplish all three working across the aisle. And I would love if, being your first time on here, if you have more questions or want to address anything else. I do think I addressed the guns, but I am 2A. I believe that when it says shall not be infringed, it really, that's exactly what it means. Um, and then healthcare, I went over that with my Medical Freedom Act. So, yeah, thank you for that great question.
Is it bad that I zone out when you do your introduction now?
I mean, I don't know how many times you've heard that, Chris, so I don't blame you for zoning out.
And then also anything else on CENIAC for Senate has a little more in depth on each part, or obviously ask the questions here because then I don't have to come up with questions. It's my favorite part.
The website we have worked really hard on to get you a lot of information. Even the issues of gun control is on there. I addressed the Safe Better Communities Act, and I addressed the Dobbs decision both extensively. And both, well, I know the Dobbs Act got published in the newspaper. I'm not sure if the other one I got published outside of my website, but they're both on there. Give a lot of information of what I really believe.
And I went ahead and did a quick Google search for your veteran suicide rate. And the last I could find was 2019, which was 6,261.
Okay. Which I thought I'd have to calculate it, but I thought someone said it was 23 a day.
17.2 in 2019.
Okay, 17.2 per day. So that's really an issue, and it means that they're not getting the mental health care that they need. So this is something that we're going to be bringing up over and over during this election cycle, because we really need to give them the care that we promised them when they're signing up.
Absolutely. And we have another one. I would try and pronounce your name, but I'm terrified I'm going to say it very wrong. Why is healthcare so expensive?
So healthcare is expensive in numerous ways. One I really want to look at is the patent war and how we can make that more efficient. Patents have not served well in the medical industry and have reduced competition within it. That's one reason why we saw a huge rise in insulin when one company controls that whole patent and there doesn't allow for any competition. So I think ultimately, when we open it up, we make it more free and we make it more competitive. That will reduce the prices overall. And really, I think the patent war is one of the first places we start. And additionally, I think with more government regulations, we also see we have to have more compliance standards, and often that makes medication and services more and more expensive as well.
Thank you, Lael. I got it. But yeah, healthcare is it's a monster right now. I don't even go to the doctor anymore unless I can't get out of bed or something, or
Well,
my wife forces me to.
so that's the thing that with even Obamacare, that it actually really there's certain people it helped. It helped those who were under a certain income, but those who made just over that income, which I fell into that category, actually it ended up hurting more because it made it more expensive in the long run. And I think that this wasn't addressed enough. And even there were certain issues, such as he said that you'd be able to see and maintain whatever doctors that you currently have, which just wasn't true. That was a flat out lie. So there, even though Obamacare did some good things for certain groups, I really want to see it opened up and a more efficient healthcare for everybody that just really serves, no matter what income level you make, a more competitive um, medicine, so that we can really reduce cost overall. And we can also talk about, the regulations when with hospitals in itself, and there's actually limits to how many beds a hospital can have by the government. So we can't even put in another hospital without that government approval, which is just crazy. And it actually really hurt during COVID, which is another reason that prices increase as well, when we don't even have enough beds for everybody who needs them in situations like COVID.
Well, and you're seeing it a lot more now of people. You're starting to see doctors that are afraid to perform certain medical procedures without talking to 3 lawyers first before they do it, and it's like uh, that's not the way this is supposed to be. There's something wrong when you have to call a lawyer before helping somebody.
Yeah. So I think, we have to also trust our physicians. They take an oath of office, and oath of office is not an office, but they take an oath before they serve. And really that's to protect life and help communities. And if we're truly trusting our system to educate doctors, we also need to trust that they're going to take care of our communities and know what's best for them, know how much services they need, know what services they need. So really, I think that when we overregulate, we don't trust our professionals and our science behind it.
Absolutely. And if it could just be cheaper, just like everything.
I mean, I'm not economically in Todd Young's level, and I feel it. Like I have to decide: do I go to the doctor for this issue, or do I wait it out? Do I change my diet 4 times to make sure that I am doing everything I can before I see a doctor? And this is real issues that Hoosiers have to deal with. So it's nothing new to me. I definitely fall in that category of having to evaluate what medical services I can get.
Absolutely. I do the same. So Carla has another question here. Weed legalization for medication and decriminalize marijuana for recreation stands.
Yeah, so this is something Indiana is behind on. I think the last count was 37 states have legalized it. On the federal level, the Congress did pass the MORE Act, and that act would fix a lot of the issues. I think that it legalizes it. I know it legalizes it in all 50 states. Um, and I think it takes care of the bank issues. So the Senate promised to see it. I haven't seen anything since they promised. I'm not as optimistic it'll pass on the Senate level. The Democrats have ran on this issue, but that doesn't mean they'll actually show activity on it. It's easier to run on an issue than actually fix it. So we'll see what they do. I hope that they pass the MORE Act in the Senate, and then I hope Biden will sign it. And if it does, I think this will take care of that. But I'm 100% for um, getting it legalized. And I even on the criminal justice front, I think it doesn't serve our communities to put all these individuals behind bars for this substance. So definitely want to see improvement in that area.
Absolutely. And I think it's a crime that it's still illegal.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it very difficult for families who are separated because of criminal justice and because of the time that they have to serve. And it really just isn't. efficient for our communities to be jailing all these individuals.
Absolutely. So we have a follow up. What do you feel the state's role is in education? Do you feel vouchers are fair to public schools?
So I'm going to address this from a federal issue, and I think it's really important to understand what roles go where. And on the federal level, I see that it affects about 8 to 10% of your school's income. And what I like to tell people is when we see that money coming in, there's often very restricted and red tape that comes with that money. And so I think what we can do is make that money more accessible to our schools by not having the federal red tape and ultimately taking that back to the individual communities. And so when we do that, we can actually raise teacher pay. We can make schools have better education and not increase taxes at all just by simply reallocating where that taxes is going. I think it better serves you on the state level. And I think our state schools could improve. And additionally, I think that school options are important for Hoosiers. I think that public schools are great for those who need them. And I also am an advocate for those who want to choose other options. Uh, I was homeschooled for 12 years, and I think that different education types work for different individuals. So I'm definitely advocate for school choice as well as making sure that the public schools are funded adequately and um, and and by getting the federal level out of it so that we can show that we can get more income to our schools.
Absolutely. And then we have Paul, who's out here just promoting absolutely everything that he can.
Hi, Paul. I love how you follow me and you really promote libertarians all across the state. But proud supporter, he's bought in my T-shirt. I think you pointed out, and he's bought my yard sign. If you want to buy those, you can go to proudlibertarian.com and search Sceniac. Those are products that we do get a little bit of profit from, so they might look a little bit on the high end, but we do get some kickback for that for the campaign. So that's why you see that price.
And they're very comfortable.
Yeah, so I've been hearing really good things about the products that are coming in.
We have another one from Lael. Would love to see tax cuts for businesses that offer preschool scholarships for their employees' children.
So I'm a huge fan of tax cuts, period. I think the more we reduce taxes, the better it serves Hoosiers. My main focus is to get individuals tax cuts, and that's where I think we start. But that goes additionally to small businesses, and the more tax cuts we can make, the better. I think it serves people better to do more with their own money.
Yeah, I would love to have some of my money back because kids are expensive.
They are.
I don't have any preloaded questions.
No, you're good. We can go back to talking even a little bit more about the town halls. I think,
I'd say we only kind of briefly touched on it.
yeah, well, because we like to address the questions as they come in, so we started talking about them, but we can continue that conversation as well.
So, you said your last town hall, you had a little bit more showing of support at that one. Do you think that was it just because it was your hometown, or do you feel maybe doing these town halls were kind of starting to get a little more people interested and wanting to learn more about a different option other than picking the lesser of two evils?
Definitely a little of both. I come from a large family. I have 5 siblings, and so that in itself, when your family shows up, definitely helps. But we also saw people come from South Bend to see me. We saw people come from Fort Wayne from that town hall to support libertarians and myself. We saw. I'm trying to think of the other farther areas people drove for that one. But yeah, from an hour to hour and a half away, people decided they wanted to hear from not just me, but the other libertarian candidates that were on stage. So it was definitely a little of both, but it was good to see a lot of familiar faces, including faces that I haven't seen in a long time. close family friend was there from someone I hadn't seen for a long time. He's more on the Democratic side, so I'm not going to say that I specifically drew him in, but we had a great conversation after. And, he was excited to see my run. So those are some great things that happened at that town hall.
It's always good to see. I love when I talk to people and they're like, I never thought there was another way. And after you actually talk to them for a minute, it all eventually just turns back to actually talking about things.
Right. And most of these are tabletop issues. I wouldn't always go straight into Dobbs with your next door neighbor, but at the same time, we can have civil conversations. Sometimes the town halls weren't always civil, but when people are passionate about their rights, that's important to note. And I think ultimately we do have rights and we do have freedoms, and sometimes we have to get vocal if we feel like those are infringed upon.
Absolutely. So, what are your top 3 goals in Washington after being elected?
I mean, so we can talk about broad or specific, but accountability, right? I think showing what a public servant is number one, and that's being accountable to who is your employer. So definitely showing how leadership needs to change, and not just on the Senate level, but as Washington as a whole. Secondly, just going back to fiscal sanity policies, I really want economic opportunities for my nieces. I feel that we're not in a place in our nation that will give them the same economic opportunities. So, really focused on addressing our spending habits in Washington. And it's like going into a household, right? I've had to do this within my own household, but you go and you're like, I'm spending more than I'm taking in. I need to figure out how I can reduce this. Do I need to go out to eat a little less? Do I need to spend a little bit more in this area as an investment? And those are very real things to look at when we're in Washington. I think sometimes people make economics look very difficult when in reality, we can simplify it to how much do we have to print? How much is this going to affect who we are serving? So, whenever we print money, it causes inflation, which really is a fancy word for more taxes on your money. Think about it this way. Often banks, I mean, I'm going to just throw out numbers from when I first researched this. So this was in high school, but I think there's like a 2.8% return rate at a bank for your money. And currently at that point, inflation was like 3.5%. So by keeping your money sitting in a bank, you're actually losing money. So inflation is really just a fancy word for taxes on the common person and reducing the value of your hard work and your money. Thirdly, I think making sure that our programs that do serve the public, which that's an important part of this job, eh, are really doing what they're designed to do. And I think specifically the VA is a really important look at that. Is if they're not getting the outcome that we desire and serving our constituents, if they're not giving that purpose, then we really need to address that and see how we need to fix those issues.
3 pretty solid goals just to start.
Yeah, and I mean we got lots more to go through. I always consider it an incremental approach to libertarianism. You'll see libertarians are very have a very broad spectrum of how they want to see our freedoms taken back, including abolish every organization. But really, my program is the incremental idea of how do we just make it efficient and do what it needs to, what it said it's doing, and how can we get more money back to Hoosiers and people across America?
Absolutely. So, Lael has another question. What are your thoughts on the Democratic candidate
For
for
my
Senate?
for Senate,
Yes,
okay. So I think that um, when I first met him, I'll describe him as the Trump of the left, and by that I just mean he's passionate, but he's also very loud and boisterous, and that works for some politics. I think that ultimately it's really just a way to distinguish yourself, but I don't think it's what Hoosiers need to serve them in Washington. I think they need someone reasonable who can come to the table and discuss issues with both sides. But my main concern with him, and it's a concern on both sides, but specifically with 1A rights. Because I think when I look at the Democrat Party and something they've been strong on is the First Amendment rights. They're the ones that said, look, we're going to push this boundary, but it's for important reasons. But we actually saw the opposite happen with him in his city, where he said, your First Amendment rights don't matter if it's for my political gain. And by that, I mean he specifically attacked somebody on the opposite side of the aisle with freedom of speech. So I think if we elect him, we're just going to see more and more rights infringed upon. And this is concerning. I don't want to see this. Both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans, both want to infringe upon our rights. And where does it stop? We have to really look at what we're electing. And that to me is a huge issue.
Absolutely. Saying anything like that tends to send shivers down my spine.
Yeah, and we did have tape of it, and I think we're gonna get that out soon. But it's important to note that they specifically said they can restrict your First Amendment rights.
Absolutely. So we have another one from Carla as well. Would you be willing to sit and figure out resolutions between the parties to tough issues? For example, immigration, codifying laws to protect them from the Supreme Court.
Right. So this is actually an awesome question. You know, it's interesting because people have called me a lot of different names from far right to far left, from left light to right light, and even moderate. So it's interesting because they hear these issues I discuss, but um, they want to think very black and white about the issues. But what I'm trying to show is that we can come to the table and have solutions that actually resolve problems and issues for everybody. And when we work together across the aisle on these issues, we will better serve our constituents. When we just scream certain narratives from certain positions, we're really not doing anything about codifying those rights. So I really like to give the example, in this case, Dobbs, how the Supreme Court made a ruling and everybody was comfortable running on very pro life rhetoric or on the opposite side, very pro choice rhetoric. But very few politicians actually really want to do anything about the issue. So now they're being forced to do something about that issue. And when you look at it, that both had super majorities 4 times since Roe versus Wade was decided, and neither side, the Democrats, didn't codify pro women rights, and the pro life side didn't codify the meaning of life and when life actually starts. So they really like that rhetoric. But when we come to the table, we can look at all these issues. And I think it's important to work with both sides on things that we agree on. Immigration, something I agree more towards the Democrats with. My solution's more moderate as far as it's not open borders. People really like to yell open borders. To me, it's what I'm going to call legalizing immigration because it's making the process simple so that people actually have opportunity to get here and that they don't have to cross the border illegally to start that process. And we can still vet them. We can look at their medical history. We can look at their criminal history and have a vetting process, but speed it up and make America more accessible to the world and let more people live the American dream.
Absolutely. And I'll go ahead and give you a break, and I will take this question from Dustin. It says, you're probably winning over some Democratic leaning voters with the town halls. How can we help you connect with the would be Todd Young voters? So, of the 2 events that we did, not last weekend, but the weekend before, simply mentioning Todd Young got most of the people wanting to come over and talk with James or talk with us about his campaign strictly because they are not happy with Todd Young. And these were all people that were Republican voters. They came to us and they said, I've always voted Republican. I'll always vote Republican, but I will not vote for Todd Young. And they kind of still, they believe in the 2-party, but they were like, I will not vote for a Democrat though. So I was like, well, here's a better option than both.
Really, if you want to win against Todd Young, you just point out his record. When you point out the fact that he spends more than Bernie Sanders, that's a serious issue to most Republican voters. And when you point out the fact that he infringed upon the Second Amendment rights, the debt has increased every year he's been in office, all 12 of them. The fact is he's really not better than a Democrat. I think someone actually I'll have to look up the article again. I think it came out in Evansville, but it basically attributed him to a very moderate Republican, which just basically means um, that he doesn't follow the typical Republican in the Hoosier state, which wants to see their rights defended. And when you point out that record, most people are willing to at least look at another option. So we have to have a message that really shows that we're about freedom. We're about protecting your Second Amendment rights. It doesn't stop at the First Amendment; it goes to the Second Amendment and every amendment after that. So I don't think it'll be as difficult appealing to the right. Um, I was very fortunate to go on this uh, 15 tour town hall with the Democrats, and some people lump me in with them. But that's unfortunate because it's really not my message. My message is to all Hoosiers and how we sit down and come up with solutions.
Absolutely. Solution based.
Everything we have to do has to have solutions. If we just run on rhetoric, that's meaningless. And that's something I want to point out. We have to really look at the words of our politicians and hold them accountable to it. If they're not running solution-based campaigns, then we have issues. And one issue I have with the Democrats, it's a great message on the base. So the message is we need more women in politics. I agree. We do need more women in politics, but that isn't a solution to the problems of that we're being confronted with. That is something we need, but it's not a solution. So when you look at these words, I want to challenge you to look for actual solutions that benefit everybody. And whether those solutions come from a woman, which would be awesome, or they come from a man or someone who is gay or a Christian or a Muslim, when we look at solutions, we have to be able to take those solutions from where they come from.
Absolutely. And it's good to get any sort of different view, whether no matter who it is. I mean, if I actually got talking with someone while we were out at our events that said if everybody's always agreeing on everything, then someone's not thinking.
Right. And that's one thing I loved about the town halls is often there were issues that came up that we agreed on, immigration being one of those. Um, I personally think I didn't really necessarily see it from a lot of candidates, but I think a lot of Democrats still are on the more pro-peace side, and I agree with them on that issue. Um, so there's things that we can agree on both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely. And Rustin had a good point that they just want to label you because it's easier to label you left or right. And because solutions have not been a realistic option in the last 150 years. And that's
Right.
absolutely true.
And that's what I want to change about the message of politics. It's something that we have to focus on if we want. I'm going to stress this over and over because I went to see my nieces again this week. It's been a busy campaign trail, but it's really important that our next generation have freedoms and opportunities, and we only give that to them by fighting for the solutions that we have now. If we keep kicking the can down the road, which is all politicians have been doing, especially on economic issues, they just continue to kick that can down the road. It's going to fall and collapse at some point. And I don't want that to be the next generation or the next two generations. I really want to fix this issue now when we have the opportunity before it's a complete collapse.
Absolutely. And we're running, getting close to 45 minutes here. So
Awesome.
I'll go ahead and we'll give about a couple more minutes. If there's any last minute questions we want to get out there, we like to try and answer as many as we can. So I was just looking, it doesn't look like you have any events up on the website right now. Do you have any upcoming events that you're going to be out at?
So that's a little bit my fault. My event coordinator actually got on me. She's like, "You need to start the events in the calendar because we have a system where I pick and choose what events are going to reach the most voters." But we're actually going to be starting our 2A tour. We're looking at specific gun ranges to have people come out and shoot with me and understand and respect guns, but also be able to defend our rights. And I think it's both an educational campaign of how we respect the guns, but also how we defend ourselves and defend those rights. And then actual events, I believe I'm going to Service Saturday this next Saturday, and I believe that's Tippecanoe County. We have there's several more that I'm going to space out on. But I'll have to get those events up on the website. You should be able to check that and should be able to see multiple events. That falls back on me, and I got a little bit busy with my schedule.
Absolutely. So we'll make him do it tonight before he goes to bed.
Along with a few other tasks that I definitely need to get done. Oh, that goes back to I have a few thank you cards to write. My campaign manager will always remind me of that. But um, I really have a lot to be thankful for. And one, I want to say I'm thankful to my team. They're always putting in the work behind the scenes. Two, I'm thankful for the Democrats who did do a true bipartisan town hall. They invited the Republicans. The Republicans could have brought their base to these town halls. So, really, I want to thank the Democrats for that. I want to thank the people for coming out and addressing those questions. Without people coming in, the table discussions would be meaningless. And that's who I want to represent. So, really, I have so much to be thankful for. And I want to extend that gratitude to my viewers tonight. Thanks for coming in and addressing these great questions and concerns that you have.
Absolutely. So we did get a couple of questions in here, so I'll go ahead and bring those out. This one's from Jesse Martinez. The Second Amendment isn't respected as it's supposed to be. Would you loosen these illegal laws to allow the people to own machine guns and other NFA items if you could? If you could snap your fingers to make these gun laws go away, would you?
Right. So, shall not be infringed, I think, is a very important message of the Second Amendment. And we can go through each part of the Second Amendment. A well regulated militia, you can't have a militia without citizens being armed. That's what the definition of a militia is. And so the idea is that when our forefathers set up our country, really they put a lot of power within the people and who they serve. So when we talk about the branches of government, we also need to talk about the checks and balances. The Supreme Court has a check and balance system. The legislation, checks and balances, and then the president. So all three of those are designed with checks and balances. What most people don't talk about is they gave the check and balance ultimately to the people, and the 2A is how we protect that. So I see these laws as an infringement on your rights, and we really need to look at that from a federal perspective.
You already know I agree. And we'll call this our final question, unless one comes in while we're going over it. What makes you different from your opponents?
So a couple things. One, both of them are career politicians. Todd Young has served on the federal level for 12 years now, and always been in the political arena. Tom McDermott, I believe he said he's been mayor 5 terms or got elected 5 times. Uh, so both have, you know, been serving in the public arena um, as career politicians. And when I say career politicians, I think that goes back to what the definition of a politician should be. A definition should be a public servant. And I'm a behavior therapist, so I work with kids with autism. And for me, it's really about bringing the heart to politics. It's about showing people that these are service positions that really need to have empathy and understanding for the people that they serve and not be disconnected. I think often when we become career politicians, we become disconnected from who we serve. So really, if I want to simplify it, I want to put that heart back into politics, and that's why I'm running.
Absolutely. So with that, I'll go ahead and give you. All right, one more. One more. From Jesse. Would you investigate and lock up criminal politicians starting with local and state levels? Not you personally, but start that movement. Politicians haven't been tarred and feathered in a while, and it shows.
So, what I like to point out, it doesn't matter who you are, laws are blind. And that means that everybody is accountable to the same laws, same standards. So, I'll give an example from COVID when politicians were able to go to a public place to get a haircut because they had the connections and they outlawed it for other individuals. When we look at this and we see that the laws aren't being applied fairly, we know we have a broken system. To me, it's not about locking up political opponents because that ultimately is in itself an issue when we just attack the opposite side to put them in prison. To me, what it is about making sure that laws are fair and blind, and that they serve everybody. And if there's a law for the common person, it applies to every politician. And even furthermore, on the economic side, when we look at um, for example, trading, they're allowed to inside trade, which is just insane and crazy to me that some of those laws don't apply to them. So, to me, yes, I think that we need more accountability and make sure that our laws apply to every citizen.
Very true. All right. I'll give it over to you for your final comments and then we will sign off.
Yeah, thank you for listening in. These are great conversations to have. I appreciate all the questions we got tonight. We do this weekly town hall online every Wednesday at 7:30. Occasionally we will move it like nights tonight, like nights on like okay, let's start that over. We will occasionally move it from time to time, but that's to make sure that I can address more questions. So look for those updates, but typically you'll find us Wednesday nights at 7:30. Next week we have an exciting guest, Jeff Moore. He did most of the town halls with me, and I think it'll be interesting to hear his side of the town hall stories and what questions he saw that was challenging, what questions he liked to answer, and what he got from hearing from the public. So tune in next week for that exciting bit. And if you like what you heard tonight, if you want to bring a more genuine and more sincere heart to politics, please consider donating. Everything that I do is funded by the public for the public because that's how I believe politics should be. So www.skinyac4senate.com/donate. We really need those funds to come in to reach more Hoosiers. We are getting our message out there. It's been very encouraging, and I keep seeing my base grow. So we are doing the groundwork. We're going to be accountable with that money, but we do need those donations to come in. Additionally, if you feel like you don't have funds, maybe inflation is hurting you a little bit more. I know that you have either time or talent, and I would love to see those come to my team. So I need um, more volunteers on my team. I need people who are willing to go door knocking in their communities or be able to just spread the word in other various ways. Again, thanks for coming in tonight. I love these conversations and I love hearing from you. And I look forward to next week's online town hall.